It's almost time for season 2 and Christmas. It's practically here. It's Support Your Local Podcast, the show where we take a look at some of our favorite movies, one chapter at a time. I'm your host, Robert Smith, coming to you from beautiful Tombstone. Yes, that one. You're catching us right smack dab, actually closer to the end of our hiatus episodes, where we are taking a look at the 8 Christmas movies I have to watch every year. Today, if you couldn't tell from the hints that we dropped on social media and the practically here, we're going to take a look at another version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. This time we're going to take a look at the Jim Carrey live action version. A little bit of history of the movie. Released on November 8th of 2000. This movie is now over, actually, 22 years old. Isn't it amazing how quickly time moves? I mean, we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of this movie, and it still seems like it's relatively contemporary. And then you look at some of the other movies, like some of the Christmas carols that we talked about, and they're coming up on 100 years. So, it's just weird how time can be all timey-wimey in regards to that. Budget was $123 million. Box office, they blew that out of the water. They made $345 million. This was a big success. This was a big hit. It was the number 6 movie for 2000. It is, at the time, the second highest holiday movie ever, behind Home Alone, rightfully so. It has since been passed for that title by the new Grinch that just came out a couple years ago. And spoilers, that one doesn't make the list this year, but I foresee it joining the list very soon. I actually just saw that for the very first time here a couple weeks ago, and that's pretty good. I kind of like that take on the Grinch story and making him more of a social anxiety type person. He doesn't necessarily hate Christmas. He doesn't hate anybody. It's the socialization aspect of things and some of the past that comes and goes. So, but enough about that one. We're here to talk about the Jim Carrey version. So how did this come to be? So we had the 1969 version of the cartoon with Boris Karloff as the narrator, Boris Karloff as the Grinch. That's the cartoon version that we all know and love. If you want to hear me talk about that, go back a couple episodes in our hiatus episodes. That was one of them. Is made my list this year as well. For this one, Dr. Seuss had died a few years back, and his widow actually auctioned off the rights to make a movie on this. But one of the caveats was that it had to have a big name attached to it. So somebody like a Jack Nicholson or a Robin Williams or a Dustin Hoffman or Jim Carrey. And with the addition of Jim Carrey being attached to this, seeing those names when I did the research, I'm just trying to picture, like, can you picture a Robin Williams version of the Grinch? It would be equally as hilarious, I'm sure, but a completely different type of comedy and completely different character, completely different tone, I think, with this movie. Dustin Hoffman, forget it. I'm not even trying to picture that one. But Jack Nicholson, that one I found interesting. So when the director first came up, another caveat of it was had to be attached by a name, and it had to be done by a director who had made over $1 million in a movie. So it can't just be Joe Blow off the streets. So back to my original thing. So Jack Nicholson was actually the original person that was pitched this movie, and was originally attached to it. When he turned it down, then it became a Jim Carrey project, and Jim Carrey's like just coming off the highs of Ace Ventura and The Mask and Batman and Robin, or Batman Forever. I forget whatever one he was the Riddler in. I guess it would have been Batman, and had been Batman Forever. because Batman and Robin, I'm 99% sure, was the Arnold Schwarzenegger Mr. Freeze version. Sorry, my friends at Bat Minute. I'm letting you down horribly. I know. I'm sorry. But yeah, just a completely different movie if you take into consideration who those characters could have been. And I'm intrigued to see what a Jack Nicholson Grinch would be. Much like Jim Carrey, I'm not entirely sure that he would need the prosthetics to make that weird Grinchy grin. You just picture him in like his Joker makeup, and I think that's probably what somebody was thinking when they first originally pitched it to have him as a part of it. Director Ron Howard, obviously Opie from Andy Griffith's show, Richie Cunningham from Happy Days, but a big top tier director at this time. So let's see, Forrest Gump, Apollo 13. So let's hit the pause button real quick. In listening back to this, I don't know if you've heard the part yet or if you're going to hear the part, but you'll hear a squeaking door coming up here soon. My son was coming in and out of the room when I was recording this originally, and it threw off my concentration, and I accidentally said that Ron Howard was the director of Forrest Gump. And I kind of knew that it was wrong even as I was saying it. I couldn't place the right person though, so I just kind of let it go, kept with the flow of the episode. Obviously, Bob Zemeckis was the director of Forrest Gump. I mentioned that Ron Howard was the director on Apollo 13, so I had Tom Hanks in mind. Knew that he had another Tom Hanks one in there. I think it's Splash. But yeah, so apologies to Mr. Zemeckis. I should not have made that error to a fellow Robert. I will apologize to you at our yearly meeting of the Roberts, which nobody is allowed to talk about. But yeah, so Ron Howard, he also did Willow, a few other good classics on there, but unfortunately Forrest Gump just was not one of them. So please don't at me. Love you guys. He's already got a couple major motion pictures under his belt, so definitely hits the criteria of making over $1 million. Little bit of my history with the movie. So I watched this first on DVD, and I admittedly did not see it for a few years, actually, and after it came out. I wasn't excited about the concept of a live action Grinch. I think of things like that, like when you take away pieces of people's childhood, and obviously, as I spoke to in that previous episode, the cartoon Grinch and the book The Grinch were such key parts of my childhood that to see them try to make a live action one, I couldn't buy into, and I have that feeling for a lot of stuff even today. So I did not see this in the theater. I did not go out and get this when it first came out on DVD. I would have seen this a few years later, probably right again around the 21, 22-year-old mark. So we're talking like 04, 05 maybe, where I was purposely going out and seeing these Christmas movies and compiling this list of the movies I have to see. So this was one of the ones that was kind of in my origin story of this series. And I have to admit, I was pleasantly surprised when I first saw it. This is my kids, my wife and I's kids. This is probably their go-to in regards to Christmas movies. They'll watch this one year round. It's not just a Christmas thing. They really enjoy watching this one, whether it's the Grinch himself or the music or whatever it is. This is kind of their go-to. And quite frankly, it's my go-to with the kids as well. So if I have a little bit of time and we're going to pop on a Christmas movie, this is probably going to be one of the ones that we're going to pop on because I know they're going to enjoy it. I know I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not suffering through it. They're not suffering through it. It's just a go-to for kind of everybody in the house. And like I said, I didn't necessarily first like this movie because I thought, one, that no way could a live-action version of a Dr. Seuss movie work. We had not been haunted with The Cat in the Hat yet to see just how failing that can be. But two, I was kind of on the tail end of my Jim Carrey kick. So full disclosure, I never really cared for The Mask. It's just not my bag. Ace Ventura was funny. Ace Ventura When Nature Calls was not as funny. Didn't really dig Batman and Robin, or excuse me, Batman Forever. I don't know. Jim Carrey was just starting to become too much. He was everywhere. He was in everything. And it was getting to the point where you watch a movie and he was just Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey. Now, fast forward a little bit to some of the best parts. Where I said I didn't think a live-action Dr. Seuss movie could work, that's actually my favorite thing about this movie. Ron Howard and his vision and the art direction of this movie, they nailed the look of what Whoville would look like in real life. I don't know how, but through their imagination, they were able to bring Whoville to life. The props are all practical. There's very little CGI in this movie, or at least very little noticeable CGI. The practical effects are there. The practical props are there. They just nailed it. It's a 10 out of 10 in regards to making Whoville and making it capture the essence of a Dr. Seuss world. Another big part that I like is the cast. So this has a lot of that people or that person's cast in it. Molly Shannon, Bill Irwin, a few other ones like that. But there's no one really in Jeffrey Tambor. There's no one really overshadowing anybody else in this movie, and that is, to be fair, that's very, very hard for them to have done that when Jim Carrey is your lead in that movie. But even if it wasn't, nobody is going overboard with their character. There's not a lot of scenery chewing, even to some degree Jim Carrey. They are just really great character actors, and they get their point across, they get the humor across, they get the emotion across without really hamming it up, and I can appreciate that. I also like that in this version, the Who's aren't just the innocent bystanders of the Grinch. The movie shows that the real enemy and the real thing that he hates about Christmas is the commercialization of everything and the status of people and the status of Christmas and who gets the best things and, oh, I got you this gift and I want this gift and I got these things and look at this, ancient chandelier. And it just does a really good job of showing kind of the ill effects of what happens when you lose sight of the real meaning of Christmas and the reason for the season. And to that effect, something that they do very, very well is, along with that, is they do a great job of showing that however all that stuff is happening, the Who's in their essence still have that Christmas spirit. With or without it, they do get a wake-up call as much as the Grinch does, but it shows that they can be redeemed even when they're not necessarily the antagonists of the movie. So the Grinch gets redeemed, the Grinch gets saved, but Whoville does at the same time. Something that the book and the cartoon doesn't necessarily capture as well. I think they did a really good job of setting that up and bringing it back. So some of the cons of the movie, some of the jokes just kind of land really flat for me. There's a lot of sophomoric humor, like the kissing of the dog's butt and through, I don't know, it's just not necessarily something that somebody in my age group finds funny. But at the same time, I don't know that I would have found some of these jokes funny even when I was that age. I love me some crude humor. I'm a Kevin Smith diehard fan, especially in my teenage years, Monty Python. But just some lowbrow humor just doesn't land for me. It's never been my bag. And to be fair, I spoke of nobody really overshadows anybody in the cast. Jim Carrey still will just be Jim Carrey for a little bit in this movie. It's not as over the top and as bad as he is in some other movies, but there's still some things where he can be just a bit much as usual. So I hate the fact that he sings and kind of butchers the remix of the Grinch song. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. Just things like that. It's I don't know. It's just a thing. He can be a bit much. He's kind of that Chevy Chase when we spoke to about Christmas Vacation a couple weeks back. It kind of goes along with that trend. Something that has bothered me ever since the very first time that I've watched this movie. So the lady that the Grinch is in love with, and has a crush on since they were kids. She's a very attractive woman. I'm not saying otherwise, but when she wears her dress kind of off the shoulders, she has the scariest, sharpest, most protruding collarbones I have ever seen on another person in my life. They scare me every time. It literally looks like she has a coat hanger hanging off of her neck. I'm sorry. I don't mean to body shame. Again, she's a very beautiful woman. She's very slender. I think that's a part of it. But it's very, very noticeable. Her collarbones are quite, quite scary. And finally, does this movie make me cry? And not usually. The Grinch in and of itself is not as heartwarming of a story or heartwarming as a movie as some of the other Christmas ones. There are admittedly different times where, depending on where I am in my mental health, where I will glisten a little bit when I hear the "Where Are You" Christmas song. And it's never when Cindy Lou Who sings it. It's the Faith Hill version that's sang at the end, and then I hear it on the radio when I'm listening to Christmas music all the time. Depending on where I'm at in my headspace, that one can catch me. That one can catch me every once in a while, but otherwise not usually. It's not really a tearjerker type movie. It's a feel good type movie. But yeah, that is the How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey version. We are speeding towards Christmas. As you're hearing this, we are 2 weeks away or excuse me, 3 weeks away from the big day. We do have 3 more movies yet to get to you. We'll be getting those out to you weekly. What still is left on the list? I'd love to hear what your guesses are. Please hit me up on social media. We are Support Your Local Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can email me at supp, that's SUPP, your local podcast at gmail.com. Please take a moment to rate and review us on whatever podcatcher it is that you're listening to this on. It helps us immensely. It helps us move up in the rankings. It gets us in the ear holes of more and more people, making this podcast better and making this podcaster better too. Let's be honest. But it's absolutely free to do that, and it helps me out immensely. Speaking of free, give your friends, give yourself the gift that keeps on giving. Once again, absolutely free. Get them to subscribe to this podcast, where you'll get to hear my soothing, dulcet tones every week, going over some of our favorite movies. We're getting close to season 2, guys. The Quick and the Dead, Sam Raimi's classic. Definitely stay tuned for that. But until we meet again, folks, once again, if you're listening to this closer to Christmas, have a Merry Christmas, have a Happy Holidays. May it be as beautiful as you want it to be. But until then, as always, support your local podcast.